Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, hanging out with these nerds.
Scott Garibay.
And I'm Nerdarchist Ted.
And today we're going to be talking about what happens when Pathfinder goes to 2nd edition.
Don't forget the Nerdarchy newsletter. It's a great way to learn, to get great gaming tips from the Nerdarchy crew, to learn how to game with the Nerdarchy crew. It's a wonderful weekly resource.
So the question is, Pathfinder, what has it been around for, about 6 years now?
Oh, easily. So it came out right before 4th edition. And I think it's probably around 7 or 8 now, easily.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's getting aged. It's going to start showing its age.
Yeah.
Now, this is really tricky because Paizo, has a decision to make. It's almost like it's almost unheard of for a long-standing role-playing game not to get a new edition eventually.
Right, I totally agree.
Here's the problem. If you're one of the guys that switched to Paizo because you hate Watts for coming out with a new edition,
Exactly.
So do you love Paizo enough to accept a new edition, or you're like, oh, they sold out too? What is that going to be like? And the other, so then there's the people that came in afterwards and they started with Pathfinder. Maybe not such a big deal for that crowd.
The way I would summarize what you just said is, can they? Should they? So the first question is, having seen the Pathfinder community, do you think they can sell a 2nd edition to that community, or is that community so dedicated to staying with the old edition? What do you think?
I think with anything, there is always the possibility to put out a new edition. Easiest way to look at this, go on Facebook. You're going to find groups for 1st edition D&D, 2nd edition D&D, 3rd edition D&D, 3.5, 4th, 5th. You're going to find groups for Pathfinder. All of them have a solid market of people who continually play with that set of rules. Now, should they? Well, that begs the question, because what happens when that what's going to happen when they do that? Their market is going to split. There are the people who are going to, as with everything else, say, you know what? I don't want to move on to another set of rules. I don't want to go buy new books. I don't want to have to learn a new rule system. How do I convert my character from this edition to that edition?
So Pathfinder is really just a doubling down on 3rd edition.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's D&D 3.75.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So does Pathfinder creating a 2nd edition cause another company to come in and basically create the next Pathfinder? How do you triple down on 3rd edition?
So actually, that's my answer. I think, and the reason why I wanted to why I wanted to talk about this is, I think Paizo cannot do a 2nd edition, and the reason why is, at this point, I think we can all agree they've probably taken a blow from D&D 5th edition. I think they would have been really blessed if 5th edition had failed. 5th edition did not.
5th edition did not fail. It's taking off. People love it, and I talk to people here and there that are steadfast Pathfinder players, and they like what's there. Now, I don't know all the nuances of why they got into Pathfinder, whether they were one of the crowd that says, well, you know what, I tried 4th and I didn't like it, or whether they were I don't want to switch and I'm going to stick with this.
Or it's their first game.
It's their first game. So, there's all these different options. Now, I think if they do a new edition, there's going to be people that stick with the set of rules. They're not buying new books, and they have to be like every other group that's out there other than the current that are saying, well, I'm just not going to get any new books.
But there is tons of Pathfinder stuff out there. They don't really need to go to a new game as a group, as players, because they have enough to go forever.
There's a stack of Pathfinder books that I could hide behind.
Let me say something to us as Nerdarchy and Scott. We're fans of D&D, but the truth of the matter is we actually are just fans of RPGs.
That's true.
And
Absolutely.
we like to play a lot of different games.
Exactly.
Now, what I find in both Pathfinder and D&D, most of those people never leave never leave those games. They never play anything else.
It's pretty common. It's true.
So when I'm having a discussion with somebody, and this happened a while ago, and once basically we're discussing 5th edition and Pathfinder, And I'm like, well, what do you play? What else have you played, or do you play? And when they say,
no, nothing.
When they say nothing, I almost disqualify them as having any merit to offer to the discussion, because the simple fact is, like, they only know D&D style games,
right?
And you know, and there's so much more out there, and
There's
like even among
really
our own
is.
fan base, like, we're like, hey, we talk about something, just throw it with 5th edition. I'm like, that's a stupid idea because there's other games that do it better,
right?
Like, you know, there's different reasons to play different games. Like, and in this instance, like, Pathfinder is the crunchiest version of D&D ever.
Absolutely.
So, going full circle back to Pathfinder 2nd edition, how do they come up with a new one? What do they do? How do you make that crunchier? Or if you go lighter, there will be Pathfinder fans that are dissatisfied, because I know players that went to 5th edition, played it for a while, and they were dissatisfied. They wanted the options and choices of Pathfinder.
Well, and my take is, I understand where you're coming from, that you can always do a new edition, but we've seen in the role-playing game industry that there's times where you should not. 4th edition was unmitigated a mistake. It took them a lot of time to fix that mistake, and they had to re-establish the community.
The 4th edition at a concept needed to be done. There were issues with 3.5. There were balance issues. There were things that were just, misworded or done incorrectly. And I felt, after the amount of time, the amount of things that they essentially messed up on, they needed to make a 4th edition. And they decided, I don't know who made the call, but they decided to say, let's do something different. And they tried to sell a game that was going to rely very heavily on miniatures, that was going to essentially push the video game market along with it. And it was not the huge success that they were hoping it to be. Now, there are people that still play 4th. There's people that will, swear hands down that 4th is better than 5th. And if that's your opinion, you're entitled to it. I disagree.
4th edition got Alaskan. And when I say Alaska, they used it to build a bunch of bridges, but the problem is those bridges went to nowhere.
Yeah.
So it really hurt them in that sense.
It was a learning experience.
Businesses hate learning experiences where they lose money.
And that's what I'm talking about. So if we're talking about Pathfinder, you're talking about Paizo. Paizo is a real company. This is not a guy building a role-playing game in his free time.
It's not a handful of guys sitting in the basement talking about D&D stuff.
This is at least 10, 20 people, with an actual building and an actual business structure that they have to keep paychecks rolling. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so basically, right now, they're playing with a remnant of the fantasy tabletop role-playing game community. If they take that remnant and they cut that even by a fraction, even if they lose a third, if they lose 2/3, do you really keep those doors open? I really feel they cannot do second edition.
It hurts. My biggest thing is, where do you go? Like, what do you do?
Exactly.
Pathfinder has so much bloat to it, and it's such an unwieldy giant beast.
Yeah.
Do you go rules lighter? Well, their community is spoken. They don't want rules lighter.
Right.
Do you go is there any actually way to go rules heavier?
I think there is a place to go. So one of the things is, I do not think they should do a Pathfinder 2nd edition. What I think they should do is they should do Pathfinder rules, saying, we own this rules. This is a valuable rules engine.
Branch into other genres.
Right, exactly. And so I would go into science fiction.
Smart. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's really time for them to build new games and new worlds on their current engine and say, this is a valuable engine, and we want to push it and declare its value and give value by doing more genres.
Sure, I mean,
absolutely.
They have a horror book coming out, but they could do a horror genre. They could do the science fiction, but they could do superheroes. And here's the thing, right? If you do, if you go into new genres, you get to add new rules and more crunch.
Exactly.
The problem with those ideas speaks back to what you said just a couple minutes ago. Pathfinder players, and typically D&D players, they don't want to play those other games.
Well, see, that's just it. Is I would not go. So actually, I've sold 2/3 of my Pathfinder books. I've kept books that I could not get rid of them because I love them so much, and I still have the core rule book and a few others. NPC Codex is fantastic. But also, along those lines, if they brought out a space opera Pathfinder game, I would absolutely go ahead and buy that. And the reason why, is there isn't a D&D space opera book.
Right.
And so that's a great way to carve off D&D 5e fans back into their fold, and so new genres will get there.
Here's the thing too, right? If you use the same engine and the rules are all interchangeable and they work together, there are people that will take that stuff and buy it just to dissect it, put it into their fantasy game.
Right.
But I think it would be a stronger move than
a second edition.
And not only that too, like people are just huge Paizo fans. Like,
I am hugely.
So there's a good possibility that people that aren't into those genres will check it out to support Paizo.
Yeah, and also if you're go ahead.
And you also have, as you call me, the completist. It's like, well, I've got to buy it just because it's, another book.
Absolutely.
Says that strip on the cover, or says Pathfinder. All right, add it to the collection.
I mean, if you look at Lewis Porter Jr., that's what he primarily does, is try to add more and more science fiction into the Pathfinder system with his stuff.
And also the superhero genre. He's melting
the
superhero genre in there, which I think is a great blend. Also, along with those ideas, I would highly suggest people go out and check out Paizo, because I feel when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons miniatures and supplies, they're one of the best companies out there.
The accessories,
The pawn sets are fantastic and can easily be used in any fantasy role-playing game, D&D 5e easily. And the pawn sets, there's hundreds of them out there. They're great.
Tons of flip mats.
Absolutely. The flip mats are fantastic. They also have a small section of maps. These maps that are actually, they're made out of like cardboard stock, and they come like this. They're $13, and they have dozens and dozens and dozens of them, easily convertible into any, not even convertible, like they slot directly into
any
5e games. You don't have to do any conversion. And the map systems, these they're, I think they're about like 8 inches by 5 inches, maybe a little smaller, and then they actually tile together. There is no equivalent on the D&D 5e side. Not
on the 5e side, but Watts did a bunch of those. I
the old ones in fourth edition. You're absolutely right.
And I think maybe third, maybe it was all fourth.
Yeah,
no, but there was a bunch of them.
And you're absolutely right. And so one of the reasons is really check out Paizo's stuff, and the reason why is the ones that Paizo's did are cheaper and better and more range.
Okay.
So they cover rooftops and harbors and cities, and they go much, much broader than they ever did with the 4th edition maps. And because they're thinner, they cost less money. And
the other two, like on the miniature side of things, actual minis, I'm kind of displeased with what Watts has done recently with their miniatures lines. I used to enjoy the sets that they came out with. It wasn't a bad price for the value. Like it was like 3rd or 4th edition ish. But now you get 5 minis for like $15.
4 or 5.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of miniatures. I've spent countless dollars on D&D minis, and I've got a bunch of Pathfinder minis as well, and I don't have anything wrong with the actual stuff from Pathfinder minis that I've gotten, but I have to 100% agree with you, Dave. The cost per mini for the 5e minis, I've kind of looked away from it.
Yes.
Yeah, they've outsourced it. It's not, so it's not affordable for us as players, or it's not worth it. The values are not there. You absolutely, if you buy, you better buy it in bulk and from Amazon to get the best price you can possibly get. Yes. To make it remotely worth it. And they're not as good as they used to be. Like,
I mean, there's some quality. There's some of them that are really nicely done.
If I'm paying a premium, I want them all to be nicely done.
Yeah.
But going back to this video is about what do we think about 2nd edition Pathfinder? I think we've thoroughly covered that. I personally agree with Scott. It would be a mistake. Their fans are not going to like that. And I don't really even know where they would go with it.
So I do have a question for you.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
You have the most robust miniatures collection of any of us.
Okay.
You have WizKids. At our D&D 5e table, you've used some WizKids minis. You used Pathfinder minis. You used Dungeons and Dragons different version minis,
Absolutely.
right?
Yep.
And all extremely well. Do you think that if they did do a Pathfinder 2nd edition, the fact that they are dedicated to a miniatures style would allow, do you think there's enough of a market that they're saying, hey, we don't just allow you to use grids, but we actually have built a game for it? Would that be an opportunity where maybe the idea that a 2nd edition would work because they're so dedicated to miniatures combat?
I don't think they liked it very much with 4th edition.
Well, I think Ted is actually the best qualified to answer this because he's the most dedicated to miniatures.
It's really going to depend upon how it's presented.
Yeah.
If you alter the rules a little bit and you avoid those concepts that I don't want to say everybody, that so many people despised about 4th edition, and talking about the grid and the maps as part of the core mechanics. I think if you avoid that, you might have a better chance. But ultimately, you guys brought up good points.
Yeah,
making a second edition is probably gonna result in more problems, possibly causing that same rift between 3rd and 4th of D&D, and what is that going to leave Paizo's market as? Because if people say, well, all right, well, I'm not going to a second edition, I'll just stick with these set of rules, how much of that core populace of Paizo players are going to just stick with the rules?
They're going to have to come up with something truly amazing that grabs players by the balls and just drags them right into the game.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it would be a flop. They're in a difficult position. They have to figure it out.
Yeah. And they're a great company, yeah.
So what do you guys out there think? Are you Pathfinder players? Do you want a second edition? Would you bury your head in the sand if just with the basic announcement of a second edition? Put your thoughts, comments down below. While you're at it, like, share, even subscribe.
Check us out at nerdarchy.com.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.